are being recorded, so I'm just recording this one now, so we're gonna be halfway done. Yeah, so all the other sessions are recorded, and I'll put them up on our Facebook page. It's facebook.com/BOOCHFEST, and if you just Google BOOCHFEST, you can find it there. Trelucia, do you mind if I unmute you, and do you want to ask your question there? Is that all right? Let's see. Trelucia, are you there? Oh, the mic is off. Okay, no problem. I'm hoping I'm saying your name right. I also wanted to, okay, chat's okay. So he's asking, is there a way to make SCOBY from nothing without a mother SCOBY or starter? So yes, and it's not magic. So again, I would go to the grocery store, find a bottle of, it has to be original kombucha. You can't use like a flavored kombucha. So if it's raspberry kombucha, ginger kombucha, don't use that. But take a bottle of original kombucha and put it into a jar like this size, pour it in there, just make it look like this in a small jar, put your little top on it, put an elastic on it, and just wait for, probably it will take 2 weeks, but you'll start to see a SCOBY grow on top. But it has to be an original kombucha, and it has to be like a refrigerated kombucha. There's some like pasteurized kombuchas that you can just get off the shelf that aren't in the fridge, and they're pasteurized, so it's completely killed, so it's not alive. So just make sure that when you get it, it's a good quality kombucha that's from the fridge, and it has to be original, and you can do that. I've done that many times. That's how I started my first batch of kombucha, because I didn't have a SCOBY. The other thing I'd suggest is, like I was saying before, you can find them on Facebook groups or Kijiji or Craigslist or whatever kind of online marketplace that you can find. There are some people like home brewers that have a hotel full of them, and they're always looking to get rid of them and share them. Natalia, I can take you off mute, or put you, yeah, off mute. You mind? You there, Natalia? Cool. So your question was, my SCOBYs never get very thick, always kind of thin. Is that okay? So I would say that I mean, they should, if they're getting thin, then over time they'll get thick. So if this little tiny thin SCOBY was just sitting right there for 5 days, but this one in here, you can see it's pretty thick, like it's a couple centimeters thick, and that's because this one, before I pushed it down, had been in my basement probably for about 3 weeks. So it takes a few weeks to do that. How long do you typically leave it for? So I would say definitely, the longer you leave it, the thicker it's going to be. Like, it'll just keep growing and growing and growing and growing. So if you want a thicker SCOBY, just wait a little bit longer. Sweet. Cedrine. Got a question. Hey, Cedrine. Here, I'll take you off mute. There we go. Is that working? Oh, I don't know if hold on. I don't know if your microphone's not.
Hello?
Yeah, there we go.
Okay, hi.
Hey.
First of all, I just want to apologize. My brother set up the computer for me, and when you started talking to me, he panicked and exited. So I don't know exactly what happened before. But yes, I was wondering, I just started making my own kombucha a few weeks ago.
Cool.
And I was wondering, so every time I have a new SCOBY, can keep putting them in new jars and making more kombucha indefinitely, or is there a lifetime, a number of maximum times I can use it?
Yeah, so you're saying, because you mentioned in the chat that you're on your 5th batch of kombucha, so like once you're done it, you take it out and you put it into like a little SCOBY hotel, and then once you make another one, you take it out, and all of a sudden now there's probably like 5 or 6 in there right now, right?
Well, actually, it's like more I have each time it's a new jar, and I just make twice as much kombucha.
You're gonna have to stop making kombucha, or you're gonna have to start
Yeah.
selling it, because it's gonna get pretty out of control. Have you thought of like a SCOBY hotel before, or you just like making lots of kombucha?
Well, eventually I'll do a SCOBY hotel. That would be a good idea.
Yeah, so you can just take
Mhm.
like a jar of your old of kombucha that you've made. So like what I usually do is like, so this is a batch that is in process. So after about 7 to 14 days, it's going to be ready for bottling. And I
Okay.
take about like probably 3/4 of it and I
Mhm.
bottle it. And then the other quarter I just add to this jar. And then I take the SCOBY that was in there and put it in there. And then I
Okay.
just leave this downstairs in the basement. And I can use that for like new SCOBYs or like for starter tea. The other thing, if you don't have enough like liquid to cover your SCOBYs, I'm sure it sounds like you do. So I would just take one of your jars and just make that a SCOBY hotel and just
Uh-huh.
designate it and put all your SCOBYs in there. And then whenever you want to make a new batch, you can make a new batch. But I actually just saw in one of the kombucha Facebook groups, a woman, she kind of like pulled back her curtain in the basement and said, I forget the name that she named her SCOBY, because a lot of people have names for their SCOBYs, and she's had it for 6 years.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, so as long as it's healthy, it's covered, you're not getting any mold on it. So I mean, like as long as it's just kept like this in like kind of a good, relatively nice room temperature. I haven't heard of any like expiry date on a SCOBY hotel.
Okay, perfect. And that's for the hotel, but also the one that I keep using to brew new one. That
Yeah,
as well can use
yeah,
indefinitely.
yeah. As far
Okay.
as I know, yeah, and like that's what a lot of the like even commercial kombucha brewers do, because you think like they're brewing like some of them are brewing hundreds of thousands of gallons. Like I keep saying GTs, but they're like they're
Mhm.
the biggest kombucha company in the world. And so they don't just go out and like buy new SCOBYs every year or every 2 years. They just continuously regenerate and regenerate and regenerate over and over again, and just keep using the SCOBYs.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you very much.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks for joining. I'll throw you back on mute. Um, cool. Let's take a look at the other questions here. Right, I need it. Anne or Elsbeth, Mary France, how's it going? How's your kombucha doing? Michelle, so I know you joined us in the first few days. Are you getting a little SCOBY on top? You have any questions about it? Have you had a chance to even taste it? I think that's the fun part too, is tasting it, not being afraid to interact interact with it. Nice. Yeah, Mary France just said that she did get a chance to taste it. That's great. And it tastes like sweet tea. Yeah, like I said, it's fairly common right now because it's hasn't had a whole lot of time to do its work and convert from that sweet tea to that nice tangy, bubbly kombucha and a nice layer on top, but not much else. Yeah, I mean, it's just the nice thing about this is it's kind of a exercise of patience, and I mean, we need to have lots of patience these days, and especially this year. So it's nice just to kind of wait, but continuously like interacting with it gets you more connected. Because I know a lot of people who brew kombucha like for the first time or second time just brew it and then put it away and then don't look at it for like 14 days and then come and taste it, and then all of a sudden they're like, this is too sour for me, and it doesn't work out, and then they're like, I don't want to make kombucha anymore because I don't like sour kombucha. We were talking about the kind of mathematics and getting nerdy about it, like pH and that sort of thing. So one thing that I did at the very beginning was, in order to, like, if you think of the process as the first fermentation, then your second fermentation, so you have to have a good base in order to get a great like end product. So if you think of different commercial brands that you've tasted, if you want to just actually throw your favorite brands, let's just see if I recognize any of them. Your favorite brand and maybe like a favorite flavor of that brand that you've tasted in the chat. So the great thing about being the co-founder of BOOCHFEST is that I had a chance to taste. We had about 15 different 30 different kombucha brands storing their kombucha at on site. So I had a chance to taste every single one of them, and like I didn't get every single one because there's like 30 brands and each one of them had about 5 to 6 flavors. And first of all, the really crazy thing was that they're all different. They're all completely different. They all have, just like kind of craft beers and wines, they all have their own persona. They have their own flavor, their own aroma. Some are sour, some are kind of medium, and then some are like really, really light. And I was drawn to this one company in Shawinigan, Quebec, called Quetzal Kombucha, and they made this like just beautifully light, nice and bubbly, with very like subtle flavors. And that was my type of kombucha. I fell in love with it right away after tasting all of them. That being said, I appreciated the different kombuchas and the different flavors and styles. And so what I found was, the way I kind of evaluated them or looked at them was, I'd pick up the bottle, I'd obviously taste it, but then what I would do is take a look at the ingredients. So the ingredients always have to be on the package, so you can try and replicate any of your favorite brands and any of the flavors because the recipe is there. I mean, the recipe's not there, but the ingredients are there, so you can experiment with it. So I found that the Quetzal kombucha was sencha green tea, and it was like, that's what I've been brewing kombucha with from then on, because that's what I like. But I know some people who taste that kombucha and they're like, that's not kombucha. You have to have it like nice and sour and not too bubbly and that sort of thing. So what I was saying is, like, I found that the green tea was my favorite base. So when I was brewing my first few batches of kombucha, I did track a few things. So I tracked the recipe. So I put down, okay, I put in 1 cup of sugar, 1 cup of starter, this SCOBY, this much water, while I was making the 1 gallon jug. And I replicated that a couple times. And then, so what I would do is like have a little sheet that would have sugar, tea, water, and then like time of brew. So maybe one batch, I do like 2 or 3 at a time. One batch I'd bottle at 7 days. Another batch I'd bottle at 10 days. Another batch I'd bottle at 14 days. And when you do that and track it, then you can kind of taste and see which is your favorite kind of base and how long you should brew it for. And then once you do that, then you know, okay, I want to start making a strawberry kombucha, or I want to add some ginger to it. But at least you know you're kind of taking away a lot of the unknowns, which is in that first kombucha batch. So now I can kind of, with my eyes closed, brew an awesome batch of just unflavored kombucha. And I know that it's going to turn out because I add these ingredients, brew it for this amount of time, and then I can kind of play with the end point. But if you're playing with the teas and the sugars and all that as you're going, it's going to be confusing and hard to find a kombucha that you really are drawn to. So I would document the brewing times and the ingredients and that sort of thing, so you can kind of find your perfect kombucha. And like I said, I would definitely take a look at those, like your favorite kombucha brands, and see what sort of teas and flavorings that they use, and see if you can replicate that yourself, and even do like a side-by-side taste test to see how yours goes. Couple here. So Nikki had another question, just asking, is it okay if your SCOBY is sideways and floats to the top and sticking out? So yeah, the SCOBYs, they are alive. They do kind of, do their own thing, and just their little slow motion dance when you're not looking, going up and down and that sort of thing. I would always recommend making sure that the SCOBY is completely submerged. So you don't want it like sticking up over top. Like the only part that you want to expose is just that top layer SCOBY. But yeah, you don't, I mean, if it's sideways or whatever, it doesn't really matter what it is, as long as it's submerged, because it's happy, it's still eating its sugar and its tea and that sort of thing. Elsbeth says Loon Kombucha from Ottawa is her favorite, cranberry flavor. That's nice. I've never experimented with cranberry flavor. Anne says GT seasonal flavors, and yeah, it's definitely the easiest brand to get in the States. And yeah, some of the brands are fun, like whether they're local or national, they do come out with their base brands, or base flavors, and they also have some seasonal flavors. So it's fun to experiment with different seasonal flavors. Cedrine says hibiscus chai from Fou de Lille. Fou de Lille is also one of my favorites. They have an awesome kombucha. It's similar to Quetzal kombucha. It's nice and light. And yeah, hibiscus chai, that's interesting. I don't think I've had that one. Nikki had made roseberry and thyme last week. Yeah, I haven't done too much experimenting with herbs, but I just do a lot of fruit flavors, and I also just like good old plain kombucha. I don't get too crazy with that. I just like bottling it and drinking. Anne says, yeah, apple, ginger, lemon from Urban Rest, that sort of thing. Cranberries flavor, cool. So Cedrine had another question. The other thing I'll ask you to do too is like, we'll talk just a little bit about like flavorings and that sort of thing, because I think that's interesting to kind of share. So what sort of flavorings have you played with, or what are your favorite like homemade go-to kombucha flavorings? Throw that in the chat. So yeah, Cedrine, so far my kombucha doesn't have any bubbles. Would you have any tip for that? Here, I'll unmute you again, just like a quick question about that.
Yes.
So you mentioned that it doesn't have any bubbles. Does that mean you're on your 5th batch, and when you've been bottling it and then waiting, you really haven't got a bubbly kombucha yet?
Exactly.
So when you make your kombucha, you do it in like a 1-gallon jug, and then you wait until it's like a little bit tangy, like whatever, 7 to 14 days.
Yep,
And then, sorry?
I said yes.
Cool. And then when you bottle it, you just put it into like a swing top bottle, or what does that process look like?
The bottles, I bought the kombucha kit. It's like the bottles, I think, that are made for kombucha, so that you kind of swing it and it closes completely.
Yeah. Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Like one of these. These little guys.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah. This is actually from Kombucha Iceland. When we did our first kombucha festival, they flew in from Iceland. They brought their kombucha in kegs on the plane with them. They brought their families over, and they make a really great kombucha too. You can't get it here. You can only get it if you go to Iceland. But if you go to Iceland, make sure you drink their kombucha. Okay, so when you bottle it, you put it in here, and then do you add like flavoring to it?
I do. I usually add some cranberries or blueberries.
And then so once you put them in, you just add like a little bit of them. Like how far up would you say, like
a very thin layer, like just that covers the bottom, and then I put the kombucha in.
Cool. And is it like fresh berries?
I've used some dried ones, and I've also used some frozen ones.
Okay. And it's never come out bubbly?
No, sometimes there's a little psh when I open it, but then I taste it and there's no bubbles.
Right. So let's keep going. So you have the fruit in there, you put your kombucha in, you seal the top up, and then what do you do with it before you drink it?
I wait for 2 days, then I put it in the fridge, and then I drink it.
So it just sits on your countertop or wherever for 2 days.
Yeah.
So I know Austin talked about this when he joined us on Monday. One of the things, so this is great. You definitely need to have one of these in order to get like good bubbles. I have used like just twist tops, and I still get bubbles, but there's a couple like tricks. So one of the things that he mentioned that I typically do too is just make sure you fill it up as far as you can, so there's not a lot of headspace. So just like as far as you can up to the top. And sometimes when you're doing it, like when I do it with like the fresh fruit, I fill it up, but then the fresh fruit kind of sits on the top, and I just give it a second, and it kind of drops down a little bit, and then I add a little bit more. So the less headspace you have, the more likely you will have the bubbles. The other thing you can do is add more fruit, because you're going to add more sugar to it. The more sugar you add in that second fermentation, the more likely you are going to have that natural carbonation. So you can put like more than just a thin layer. You can do a couple layers, and you can just like experiment with that too. So I would take one, and again, this is part of like documenting it to say, okay, I put like a teaspoon of berries in this bottle, and then this bottle I put 2 teaspoons in, and then this bottle I put 3 teaspoons in, and then I waited for 2 days, and then I opened them, and you'll definitely see a difference in the bubbles. The other thing you can do is leave it out at room temperature for longer than 2 days. So
How long would you?
again, it's an experiment. So I would do 2 experiments. I would do one of just using one variable, which is the amount of fruit. So I'd take your 3 bottles or whatever it is. I would add different amounts of fruit, leave it out for 2 days, and then check the bubbles. And then on your next batch, I would say, keep the same amount of fruit, and then leave it out for 2 days, 4 days, or 6 days.
Okay, I'll try that. Thanks.
Yeah, and then every day, like you do want to just do like a quick open, and then like that. Like if you're leaving it for 6 days, and that's a pretty long time, it's going to build up a lot of pressure. You might get like a little burst out there. So if you're going to be leaving it longer, I definitely recommend just opening a little bit, just to like let the gas out of it, so you don't have any kombucha explosions that I'm sure you've seen on the Facebook groups and that sort of thing. And the other, like, do you like ginger? Or are you a ginger averse?
I like ginger.
So ginger is a super like bubble secret. So
Oh,
whenever I want to guarantee that I'm going to get bubbles, I put in some ginger. It's kind
okay.
of a little bit of a hack. So I would assume that if you even just do the same process that you're doing, this could be your 3rd experiment, and I would cut like a piece of ginger, maybe like this, just kind of a chunk like the end of your pinky, and just like a little thick. You can just chop it up and put it in there, and I'd almost like, I'm not gonna say guarantee, but every time I put ginger in mine, it's been definitely bubbly.
And would you put that like with the fruits or only the ginger?
I put it with the fruits, yeah, because sometimes the ginger is not like it's there, and if you don't mind it, like some people hate ginger, but if it's there, it just boosts like that bubble capability of it without affecting the flavor necessarily.
Okay. Perfect. Well, thank you.
Cool. Yeah, ginger's a great one. The other one is like pineapple for some reason. I don't know if it's like the type of sugar that they have in it, but pineapple always gets me some serious serious bubbles. And yeah, so there's like 2 variables. There's one is like the amount of sugar you put in that second fermentation, and the other one, well, 3 variables. One is the amount of sugar, 2 is like how long you just leave it at room temperature, and also like how warm it is. So in the summer, it's going to ferment faster and create more bubbles, and the longer you leave it out, it's going to create more bubbles. So like if you left your bottle out for 2 weeks, I would go outside and be afraid of opening it, because it's going to just fizz right out, and continuously fizz and fizz and fizz and fizz and fizz and that sort of thing. So that's part of just experimenting and documenting, so you know, okay, after 2 days on the shelf, doesn't really do much. I left it out for 4 days, I'm getting some bubbles. 6 days is too much bubbles, so let's try 5 days. But yeah, it's fun. It's the bubbles. It's almost like that's like because it's still kombucha, even if it's not bubbly. And I think everybody loves the bubbles. Everybody wants the bubbles, but just to let you know, it's still kombucha, even though you have like, I think Hannah Crum describes it as like effervescence versus like bubbles. So even after like 10 days or 14 days of just so your kombucha brewing like this, or like this rather, when the SCOBY is going to float to the top, it's good. It should be a little bit bubbly, like when you sip it, not bubbly, but like effervescent. So it's almost like if you taste like a a peach that you know is not good. It's been kind of overripe and it has that little bubbly snaps that you get on your mouth. That's what you get from your kombucha. So when I bottle it, typically it's like not sweet, it's not too sour, it's somewhere between, but I still get a little bit of like, there's something. It's not just like pure liquid. And sometimes I just drink it like that because it's good. You still get the same health benefits. It's still just as delicious. You can put it on ice and just have it kind of as an iced tea. But if you want the bubbles, then you can do all the things that I was mentioning, but don't be afraid of drinking it even though there aren't bubbles, because it still counts as kombucha. Yeah, Mary France says that ginger helps with carbonization as well too. And so you know too, like some of the kombucha brands, like the other thing, if you're comparing yours to a commercial kombucha brand, commercial kombucha brands brew obviously for flavor and for quality, but they also brew for consistency. So just as we're talking that when I make my kombucha, it's different than yours, different than Nikki's, different than Roseanne's, different than Mary France's, it's also different from batch to batch. If you're a commercial brewer, you don't want to be putting a product on the shelf that when you open it one day, it tastes good, the next day it's bubbly, the next day it's not bubbly. That's not a good way of building a great brand, because when you go to the grocery store, you want to pick up that bottle of your favorite kombucha, open it, and it be delicious and bubbly just how you like it. So what they do is they add extra CO2 to it. So there are a lot of commercial kombucha brewers, I would assume that most of them do this, is that they have a certain level of natural carbonation that occurs, but then they kind of stop it at a certain amount and then they add CO2 to it so that it's consistent. So in one way of checking that when you're opening your kombucha. So if you open a commercial kombucha, you can compare it to like the bubbles when you open yours. When you open yours, they're going to be kind of tiny. There might be like bigger ones, there might be smaller ones. But when you open the commercial kombucha brands, they're typically exactly the same size, and they all kind of like move as one. And that's because they add the extra CO2 to it in order for it to be a consistent product. So don't necessarily compare yours to commercial brands because they have a different process and they add carbonation to it. It doesn't take away from the naturalness of it and the health benefits. It just creates a more consistent product that they can produce. Mary France, could I use the soda stream to add CO2? Have you ever tried? I mean, a lot of times when people ask me questions, I try it, because what's going to happen if you just try it? Natalia said that she has, and give us your answer. It works. Sweet. So is Elsbeth. So there you go. So yeah, some people. Oh, Nikki said that she has a little bit of fizzy water from the soda stream to plain kombucha to get it nice and bubbly. Yeah. So if you have a soda stream, you can hook it up and add some bubbles, because that's kind of the same idea as what the commercial brewers do. If you want to just have the completely natural, like effervescent bubbles, then definitely add a little bit more sugar by adding either more fruit. You can also add sugar, like you can add maple syrup, you can add some honey, you can add actual just like a little, like a half a teaspoon of sugar to it, or just add more fruit. You can also add juice too. So like the berries that you use, you might want to maybe just try like a berry concentrate juice and add that to it. Nikki had a question here. Where is that? Go here. I'll unmute you again there, Nikki. You're asking about you're getting a SCOBY on your second fermentation?
Yeah, in the bottles. So like the one where I had the herbs, it's cute. It's a very nice little SCOBY, grows around the fruit. But am I supposed to be getting that?
That tells me that you're making some great, healthy kombucha.
Good.
Yeah, you definitely want to be having not you want to, but it does show up. So that's a good thing, because it just means you have a live product. The only way to get rid of that is to just put it in the fridge and keep it in the fridge for as long as you can, because that'll really slow down, almost halt, but like pretty much slow down the fermentation process. But you got to think like there's first fermentation and second fermentation, and fermentation doesn't stop until you like physically stop it. and the way to stop it is through temperature. So just like cooling it down in a really cold fridge, or by pasteurizing it, which kills all the good bacteria and that sort of thing in it. So it's a good thing that you're getting it.
Okay, so it's all right. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's fun. I've got a couple brands, like I know these guys have it. There's another one, a kombucha brand out of Oakville, Ontario, called Kathy's Kombucha, and she's very proud that every kombucha that she makes, there's this little tiny, it's just like the cutest little SCOBY that's on top, right? You can almost like put it on your finger. But yeah, when you pour it out, it's almost nice to get it. Like I just like drink it.
Yeah.
As part of the kombucha. So it's a good thing.
Good. Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
I just clarify, Drew, since you're on the speaker. I'm worried if we give kombucha, market it for people to sell it, that it bursts open with bubbles. So can I just clarify, by putting it in the fridge kind of stops the fizzing?
So you're saying if you want to commercially produce
if I gave it to somebody to sell or I sold it to somebody and I don't want it blown up in their face, kind of as an extreme example.
So as long as they store it in the fridge, in the shop that's selling it, that should be fine, shouldn't it?
Yeah, I'd be very, very clear to the people who are selling it, because like you can, like when you make it, you bottle it. Once, let's say you leave it out for a couple of days, so then you get your the proper carbonation that you want, and then you're storing it in the fridge. That pretty much like really slows it down to an almost stop, and it has to be that until the consumer opens it. So
yeah.
That's the challenge that's one of the biggest challenges for like commercial kombucha producing, is like that chain of distribution, because you're taking your kombucha and now you have to ship it. So you have to ship it cold, or if you don't, it has to be shipped within a couple hours. And then once it gets to the store has to know to put it into the refrigeration immediately, because any extra time at room temperature is going to be fermenting it and increasing the chances of it.
Some people do mail order, don't they? So how does that work, do you think, when they post bottles to people? Obviously it's not refrigerated for that whole time, is it?
Yeah, I mean, there are refrigerated like logistics companies that do that. There's also like packs you can put in, like freezer packs.
Oh yeah. Okay.
So there's different ways around it, but
yeah,
it's definitely something to look into, and just be very clear on all your packaging and your boxes and that sort of thing for people to refrigerate it.
Okay, thanks.
Maurizio, welcome. So you're joining us. It's near the end. Looking at a couple other questions here. Yeah, Camille was just given another suggestion for increasing bubbles, which is like reducing the head space. So just making sure when you're filling up for your second fermentation, you get to the top as much as you can. Roseanne. Roseanne was asking, this is great, sounds like a big kombucha family, that she's been continuous brewing for about a year and a half, and they love it. Is there such thing as too much of a good thing? She said that her teen boys just crush it on the daily, drinking a liter a day or so. So continuous brew, for those that don't know, is something I haven't tried. I'm not really interested because I just really don't have the space for it, but I've heard good things about it. It's basically, instead of just doing one batch at a time, you have this big batch of kombucha that you can continuously just kind of drain and have a cup of when you want, and then you refill it with some sweet tea and just continuously feed it, and it just continuously brews, so you're not doing batch to batch. I've never done it before, but a lot of people like that idea. I like doing just a batch to batch program, but yeah, if it's around, then you're going to be drinking it a lot more. In terms of too much kombucha, like that's a question for a medical professional. I don't want to answer that because I really don't have no idea about you and your family's medical history and that sort of thing. I know there are people who drink a liter a day and have no problems. Some people see health benefits from it. I mean, if it was me and I was drinking a liter a day and nothing has changed, then I feel like that's a good sign. I mean, I'm always a big proponent of listening to your body and that sort of thing. So yeah, I'll leave that for the doctors or a holistic nutritionist. Just go on one of the Facebook holistic nutrition Facebook groups or nutritionist Facebook groups and ask them. But I think, again, it's like there's always too much of a good thing. But I mean, a liter I wouldn't say is too crazy, because it's kind of two little 500 milliliter bottles. But again, that's not my doctor advice. But that's great that they love it so much. Cool. Any other questions? We're at the 4 o'clock mark, or like the 1 hour mark, depending on what time zone you're in. Yeah, Camilla says that baby scobies are so fun. Yes, they are. They're the cutest little thing. If you have another question, pop it in. If not, I'd love to know just one last thing is, do you have a name for your SCOBY, or have you ever thought of naming your SCOBY? Because I know a lot of people do. I've got this great little drawing. We made a mascot for BOOCHFEST, and his name is Moby the SCOBY. Let's see, Nikki, not so far. Here, I'll see if I can put him in my virtual background so you can take a look at him. Cedrine, not yet. Yeah, it's funny because people name them because they get connected to them, because again, it is a live, living organism. So you feel like you're really connected to them. I've heard some really great names. There he is. Moby the SCOBY, just holding a little sign. He's our mascot for BOOCHFEST. Maurizio, one last question. You're from Mexico. Welcome from Mexico. We got people from all over the world today. That's great. Do you recommend some brand on sale here in Mexico, or plans to distribute? I don't know, unfortunately, but what is it called? Let me tell you that. Mananova. I'll give you a website of these guys. Joined us 2 days ago. They're called Mananova. They're based out of Montreal, but they do kombucha consulting, so they know pretty much like every kombucha company in the world, and I know they do a lot of work all around the world. So just message them and ask them, because they would know. So I put the link there, so just ask them about that. Yes, they did. Yeah, right. So they did. Yeah. I get the money session. Cool, everybody. Well, thanks again for joining. That was a blast. Lots of fun. I'm glad you guys are enjoying yourselves and having a great time brewing your kombucha, because I certainly am, and it's nice to brew with other people, especially in this time, just connecting for an hour. So yeah, we'll be back good stuff, tomorrow, 3 o'clock for a TGIF with Jenna from Silver Swallow. We're going to be making some kombucha mocktails and talking about what you can do with your kombucha other than just drinking it straight. Have some fun with it. And then Saturday we'll be talking in more detail about second fermentation and flavors and recipes and all that sort of thing. So thanks again, everybody. Nice seeing ya. Enjoy your booch today. Thanks, Camilla, Elspeth, Marie-France, Maurizio, Michelle, Nikki, Natalia, Cedrine, Trilukia. Thanks, everybody from around the world. Appreciate it. Kombucha cutie, my favorite foodie. She's a female fermenting for men like me. She keeps it covered in like a fruit forbidden. All the more mysterious
to say the least. There's a squishy little SCOBY, Obi-Wan Kenobi. A symbiotic culture of bacteria and yeast. She's a kombucha cutie, kind of tangy, kind of fruity. She's bright and bubbly, sassy and free. Kombucha cutie, my favorite foodie. She's a female fermenting for men like me. It's the digestive prescriptive. Can be a little addictive. I've got a bit of a buzz. I think I'm liking this booch. Now the fungus, that's the mother. It reproduces another. So now we're gonna make a baby. Me and the cutie and the booch. Kombucha cutie, kinda tangy, kinda fruity. She's bright and bubbly, sassy and free. Kombucha cutie, my favorite foodie. She's a female fermenting. Kombucha cutie, my favorite foodie. She's a female fermenting for men like me.